little bit of information before we start with the build. This is a build that is going to carry you through the endgame as you are leveling up. It's very similar to the one that I have posted with Longsword. Instead, this time around we're talking about sword and shield. What is the beauty about this build? I am aware that are slightly, ever so slightly better versions of sword and shield builds. But the beauty of this one is that it's going to allow you to level up through the endgame. Not only that, but if you want to, you can keep using it for the tempered monsters, and it's still going to be as powerful as many of the other builds that you are going to have for more streamlined endgame gear. So if you want to level up the armor that I'm about to show you right in here, you can, because you're just going to get so much damage and so much benefit from this build that it's just going to be insane. That is the beauty of this build. This is something that you get as you level up through the endgame, and if you want to continue using this build on the endgame, which, like I said, I am aware that there are slightly other versions of this build that I am going to, of a elemental build for Sword and Shield that I am going to have in the channel, but this is aimed for people that are leveling up through the endgame and that they want to have something simple so that they can start engaging with the level 7 and level 8 quests that are giving you issues. This is just going to breeze through them. That being said, we are going to start with the gear, the equipment first. The weapon is going to be a little bit somewhat different because the weapon, you have the artisan weapons, we'll discuss about that, but I'm also going to give you the leveling options that you have for this build in here. We are going to start with the gear, the armor on itself. And for the armor, you are going to need Guardian Rathalos pieces. The Guardian Rathalos, you're going to be able to fight it if you have the low rank gear that you got from the main campaign, so there's not going to be that much issue about that. There is not going to be any problems. So this is like quite literally one of the first monsters that you should be striving to fight once you reach the high rank, and you're going to be using the head, the arms, and the legs, because each one of these guys is going to give you, well, this gives you windproof, which is extra little something, but these guys are going to give you weakness exploit, which is very much in our interest to have. And then we have the Blango chest and the waist, the coil. This is also a very, very easy monster that you are going to start fighting very, very early once you enter into the endgame. Each one of these pieces is going to give you Agitator. I can't stress enough, like, there is a little bit of a divided opinion when it comes to Agitator. A lot of people believe that there are, like, better ways to get more attack and to get more affinity. I like to use this because this is something that, since this is a very aggressive build, you're going to be dealing lots of damage, you're going to be dealing lots of damage to make wounds and to enrage the monsters. 80% of the time on the end game, if you're being aggressive, the monster is going to be enraged. So I like to have that extra attack and affinity. But also, if you wanted to, I'd say that the must would be the Rathalos pieces that I showed you, but if you want to slot, for example, burst pieces in here, be my guest. That's something that can be done for sure. Now, as for the decorations, there's a couple of changes that you can make in here. This is going to be, I do have a little bit more jewels because I have been playing quite a bit of time. You might not have as many jewels, but for example, these ones you can craft them on the melder. The ones that I advise for you to have as a must is the physique jewels, because we're going to be pairing them up with the mighty jewels. We'll talk about them in a little while. Protection, just for divine protection, this is going to diminish the amount of stamina that you use while blocking and while you are dodging. On the end of the video, I am going to show you a fight on how I use the sword and shield. I barely never use stamina, and because I barely never use stamina, I like to use maximum might to get that extra little critical hit chance so that I can have 100% of affinity all time, so that I can be using one of the most powerful things that we're going to be using with the weapon, which is going to be critical status, or if you're using a different elemental weapon, it's going to be critical elements, but we'll get into that a little bit later on. If you don't have the mighty jewels, do not break your head about it, do not stress about that. You can just add extra little something that would be, let's say, in your best interest for survivability, like for example, more healing. More healing is always useful. Stun resistance if you feel that the enemies are just being too aggressive to you and that you feel that you want to have that little stun resistance. That's something that it can change, but as soon as you get the mighty jewels, my advice is that you change into this ready in here. Now let's talk about the weapon, because there's several options that we're going to have with the weapon. Now the Artian weapons are, of course, for an endgame build, especially an elemental endgame build, are always going to be better than anything that I'm about to show you in here. But you need something to get you started farming them, because farming and making a Artian weapon, a good Artian elemental weapon, takes a monstrous amount of time. And you want something that is going to carry you throughout the leveling of the endgame. There are several good options that I'm going to give you in here, and there's crappy ones that I'm going to tell you why do I think they're crappy. This is a little bit of a niche option. Anything that has the guard skill. And let me elaborate on that. I personally like to use the perfect guards. The perfect guards, unless they nerf them, are always going to outclass the god, because a perfect guard can just perfectly block through anything, and it's also going to give you the benefit of being able to counterattack. That is why I think that the basic guard skill is useless. However, if you're not that comfortable with perfect guarding yet, that's something that it's not bad at all. Like, it's not something bad. But my advice is that if you're a user of a sword and shield, you should be striving to get better at perfect guard. But if you don't want to, then you can just perfectly use guard. And that's why I say that this is kind of like a niche or a 50-50 kind of thing, because I believe that if you want to become really efficient with the sword and shield, you need to start doing and getting those perfect guards, because they give you amazing stuff. Like, for example, the offensive guard. Offensive guard is going to give you a huge amount of DPS, especially with enemies that are very aggressive, and the perfect guard is just an amazing option to get good at reading the enemies, reading the patterns, learning and feeling how do they fight. There's many that delay their attacks, so it is that's kind of like difficult to get through and to manage. But yeah, the offensive guard is a huge amount of DPS. So if you want to make the Balahara blade for enemies that are weak to water, then you can just get started with your Balahara blade in here. This has some mixing between of guard and offensive guard, so I don't think that's that efficient at all. We have the Quematriz Cuchillo in here, which is very powerful because it has offensive guard. However, I do believe that there's a better option for you to use fire weapons. The Great Rathalos, well, the final version is a little bit cool, but it has just one level into critical element. You're still going to have to slot 2 levels into critical element, and then it's kind of weird. Like, it can be used, and it has Master's Touch, meaning that you're not going to have to be polishing your weapon. But now, because of the Sacreds, I think that that's not that much of a huge issue anymore. And then, yeah, those are like a couple of good options. One of my love-hate relationships that I have, I just love paralysis, dude. I love paralysis, especially with critical ailments, because you can just be proccing paralysis like even up to 4 times in a fight, and it's just a huge amount of free damage, and it doesn't really matter because of the critical ailment. It doesn't matter that you're fighting to the enemies that are most resistant to paralysis. Spoiler alert, there is not a single enemy in this game that is not going to be affected by paralysis. Some are going to be a little bit slightly more affected by paralysis, some of them are not, but it has critical draw, which is one of the most useless skills for sword and shields in the game, because you always want to be fighting, you don't want to be sheathing your weapon, so you're not going to be using, well, maybe the running attacks. So yeah, that's kind of nice. One of the perfect options, and as a matter of fact, the one that I'd advise for you to use all throughout the rendition, it's just, if you don't want to struggle that much, use the Princess Rapier. This has critical status, meaning that your poison is going to be that much more effective. There is not a single monster in this game that is going to be not going to be affected by poison. Even the poison enemies like the Rathian and the Rompopulos and all of the enemies that are resistant to poison, they can still be poisoned, and because of the critical status and because of the poison duration, then just still going to be poisoning the hell out of everything, and you still have 2 slots in here. And this is a weapon that you can just craft as soon as you start the endgame, because you can just fight a regular Rathian, and as soon as you fight the Ray Dao, then you can improve the next version. So universally, if you want to be using like something that is going to be durable and that you want to use all throughout the endgame and as a base weapon for the endgame without having to care about the resistances, this is a very good option. I was telling you about the best option that I think for fire enemies, and it's the Rathalos weapon, because it has a critical boost. So you can just... yeah, you're not going to be able to slot the critical elements until you get the 8th version, so you're going to have to go all throughout the rendition of the endgame. But yeah, it has critical boost, so you give this guy like critical boost. We are going to have so much affinity because of the Decos that I'm about to show you in a little while. But then you can slot a critical element in here, and then a little bit of more fire damage, and it's just going to be monstrous. And also the set that we're using benefits from having weapons that deal fire damage. So that's an extra little something that you can have in here. Decorations for the weapon should be looking something like this. You're not going to, like I said, it's going to be tricky because you're still establishing your build. You want to build your build. And me, for example, that I'm using like the poison in here for the showcase that I'm about to show you, I don't have any level 3 and level 2 poison jewels. But let's say, for example, that you were to be using, since we already have the critical status in here, if you don't have the critical status and you, for example, want to be using the weapon for the Rathalos doesn't have critical element, then bang, you can just add a critical element in here. Let me see where it is. Bang, you can just slot the critical element in there, and that's going to give you even 2 more points for 3 more points for you to increase that fire damage. So that's ideally how you want to go about it. If it is an elemental weapon, just slot a critical element. If it is a status ailment weapon, then use critical status and then furthermore enhance that critical status. And ideally that's how it's going to work. That said, I am going to take you with me into a hunt right now so that you can see how does this thing perform, and remember that you can use this build with any weapon that you want to be using, so for the any elements that you want to be using. But remember, I want to stress out, once you reach into the endgame, start building Archean weapons, because they are going to be better elemental weapons than any of them ones that I have been showing you in here. These are just guys that you're going to be using to level up. If you like the content, like and appreciate it, and also you're a gorgeous beautiful person, you're in the gorgeous beautiful person, subscribe to the channel, join the Discord. Have a beautiful day, goodbye.
lightning has them amped up. Might be able to use them as a trap.
I'll save this for later then!
set.
I've set a bomb.
That's my partner!
This is a rare research opportunity. Can't let it go to waste.